Noah Griffin and I have been connected since I taught in the room next to his mother, who was an exceptional and generous teacher. And that was a lifetime, and believe me, a career that I'll never forget ago. As you all know, a former member of this illustrious Golden Gate Breakfast Club, Noah has been one of our yearly entertainers, and he has had a fascinating journey. It took him from the San Francisco Boys Chorus, which he has sung with many different people whose names that you would recognize, the renowned HBCU Fisk, Harvard University, a lot of political positions and PR positions in San Francisco, and now life in Marin finds him as a duly elected supervisor, Tiburon Town Council. Well, this keeps him very busy and grounded in the county and many fewer trips across the Golden Gate Bridge. So I want you all to join me in giving a great Breakfast Club welcome to our former member, our friend, returning to the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, someone who I think of as a 36-year friend and a San Francisco treasure, Noah Griffin.
Hey, Noah.
What a wonderful introduction. Thank you so very much, Susan. It's always a pleasure to I have a soft spot in my heart for people that knew my mother. So she's been gone for quite some time now. And I've been a part of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. I consider myself a part for almost 30 years now, reconnecting with people like Jim Simpson, Reg Young, Tom Jacobs, Patricia Fripp, Sidney Mobell, Pete Ratto, Steve Shane, Christine Torrington, Hugh Tuck, Betty Tejas. You have Bert Hill, Rick Wilson, Hedy Cave, Arlen Kurtz, Bill Buchanan, and Mike Hanlon, and of course the late Ray Scioto and Mike Mustachi. So it's just a wonderful place to be back to. You know, when I look back in my life, I think of the old radio show, One Man's Family. Many of you might remember it here. It was written by Carlton E. Morse, took place in Seacliff, was on the air for 27 years. In fact, I did the last interview with him in his 90s. He was still writing radio scripts. But how I got to San Francisco is an interesting story. My parents were in the Florida state school system where they were paying Black teachers 47% of what they were paying white teachers by law. And my father thought that was a little inequitable. They filed in the state court, the help of one of the three attorneys, only three Black attorneys in Florida. In the late 30s, they lost. But my dad had taught Thurgood Marshall at Lincoln University back in the late 20s. And Thurgood was with the budding NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He said, no, let's throw that out of state court and try it in federal district court under the 14th Amendment. Well, it took them 6 years and they won. But my parents were barred from teaching for life in Florida as a result of that. So Roy Wilkins, who was executive director of the NAACP, offered my dad a job coming out to San Francisco, establishing 11 regional states of the NAACP out of San Francisco. So Thanksgiving Day, 1944, they came to San Francisco. And a little later, in 1945, my mother found out that she was expecting. That was unusual because they had been married for 15 years and my mother thought she couldn't conceive. So they went to the doctor at California and Steiner. She was complaining about a tumor. The doctor looked at her and said, yeah, you've got a 9-month tumor. So that was me. And then my brother came along a year and 11 months later. And it's funny, my older boys are exactly a year and 11 months apart. And so, the beat goes on. They bought a fourplex in the Fillmore. And it was interesting. At that time, when I first came to San Francisco, early in San Francisco during the Gold Rush, there were 2,000 Black folks here. And by the time World War II started, there were about 5,000. But Kaiser was bringing in 3 trainloads a day of African Americans to work in the shipyards. And by the time it finished, there were about 60,000 Black folks in San Francisco. My parents bought that fourplex in the Fillmore district. We moved out to the Richmond district in 1951. But getting back to my story about the number of Black folks in San Francisco, F.D. Haynes, who was head of the Third Baptist Church, thought, with all these influx of Black folks, I'm going to run for supervisor, and almost won. The headline in the Examiner was a Black person almost won for supervisor. The article was, we've got to change the way of we're electing supervisors because somebody Black almost won. It's interesting now that I'm on the Tiburon Town Council, where there are 82 Black folks in Tiburon out of 9,000 and managed to take the race at any rate. Well, the schools in the Western Addition weren't exactly what my parents thought they should be. So we moved out to the Richmond district in 1951, one of the first Black families to move out to the Richmond district. And it was a wonderful occasion. We're 41st Avenue between Fulton and Cabrillo, half a block away from Golden Gate Park, about 8 blocks away from Playland at the beach. The kids I grew up with, it was like little our rascals, a little our gang. We had Chinese kids, Japanese kids, Greek kids, Russian kids, and we all played on Saturdays at the polo fields. It was just a wonderful experience. Went to Lafayette Elementary School, to Presidio Middle School, and then on to Washington High. The folks I was able to meet they were fabulous folks. Mike Mathis was in my class. He was Johnny's youngest brother. And I can still remember in 1957, his coming to the schoolyard and passing out copies of Chances Are. You might want to hear my brother's. Johnny had blazed a trail at George Washington High School. Not only was he a great athlete, he was a track star, almost went to the Olympics. He was also a basketball player, treasurer of his class. A friend of mine who was competing with him in the high jump, right when they were first in college, said, "What do you plan on doing next summer?" Johnny said, "Well, I might try this record career. They're wanting me to go into the Olympics, but I might try this record career." And boy, did it turn out well for him. Even though I knew Mike, I never met John till maybe 5 or 6 years ago. He was at the Jewish Modern Museum, and he was singing the Kol Nidre. And my wife bought the last 2 tickets, $15 each, and I brought a camera. I finally got a chance to meet one of the most famous graduates of George Washington High School. Broke a lot of barriers, some unintentionally, some unknowingly, as I was going through school. I was with the San Francisco Boys Chorus from 1953 to 1958. We sang the boys' parts in opera. And a couple of things happened, well, to share with you. It was the first African-American to solo in the Cosmopolitan Opera Company. It was a small part in La Boheme, but I had to try out for it. And I won it and got my name in the book there, which was kind of neat. But then there was a musical written called Huckleberry, and it was about Huckleberry Finn. And I tried out for it, not thinking, well, why can't I try out for Huckleberry? Well, I won, and I played Huckleberry Finn. And this is 50, 60 years before they had the different kind of casting that you see in Hamilton. So when I got to George Washington High School, I thought somebody wrote a musical on Huckleberry. I thought I could try out for anything. And they said, no, you can only play a slave. Well, I didn't particularly go for that. So I protested, and there was Terry Francois was president of the NAACP. They threw the whole picket around the school. So when I graduated, there was an award that I probably was up for, which I didn't get. But 50 years later, I was voted into their Hall of Merit, which was kind of neat. But a lot of things happened during that time. I was in competition with all the other student body presidents based on one of the issues confronting San Francisco. The prize was to be mayor of the city for a day. Well, I took de facto segregation in the San Francisco school system, thinking all I had to do was introduce that and it would be taken care of. Well, I won, and it was a great day. I got the chance to shadow George Christopher all around for a day. And the humbling thing was we showed up with my parents in our car that we owned at midday. I had to give a speech before all the notables at the Fairmount. We're in the mayor's limousine with 6 police in front of us with this siren going. And then at the end of the day, I rode the bus home. So it's kind of humbling. I remember being in a meeting with the mayor. It was during budget time, and I'm just 17 years old. And this guy is going on and on and on. I said, "Mr. Mayor, it seems like he's asking for more than what he needs so he can get what he wants." He says, "Jim, this kid hasn't been in government 5 minutes," and he always figured you out. So Mayor, this guy gave me quite a look. But the time with the boys' chorus was great. We got a chance to sing with Leontyne Price, share the stage with Nat Cole, Paul Robeson, Johnny Ray, and it was just great. We had a little group called the Kings in high school, middle school, before our voice was changed. We still have a recording. It was sent over to the USO. And then by the time I got to high school, we thought, well, may as well try out at the Hungry Eye. And I went down there and tried out. And that was a great experience. People had started off like Barbara Streisand and the Kingston Trio. Didn't quite make it, but had the experience of at least having performed there, which was a real thrill. In 1962, when I was still a kid, we went to the NAACP convention in Atlanta. My mother had grown up with Mrs. King, so we wound up staying with Martin Luther King's mother and wound up meeting Martin Luther King and hearing him preach at Ebenezer Baptist Church was quite a thrill. In fact, later on today, we will be hosting a luncheon for the president of Morehouse. And King also went to Morehouse, as you might know. That summer was also memorable insofar as we climbed Mount Whitney with Sierra Club, which was interesting. It was called a Class A hike, and that's for pregnant women in high heels. There are trails that went all the way up to the top of Mount Whitney. And the thing was, I didn't realize that all those paths were paved by the Buffalo Soldiers. And also the Alcan Highway was paved by the Buffalo Soldiers as well. Well, that next year, I went to Fisk University and HBCU in Nashville, Tennessee. My father had gone there in 1919 to 1923. And although when I gave my speech as mayor of the City Youth and Government Week, Clark Kerr, who was then head of UC Berkeley, asked me to go to Cal. And I went home and told my father, he said, let me tell you something, boy, I went to Iowa for my master's, Indiana for my doctorate. I can't name 5 people I went to school with. Fisk is what you need, and Fisk is what you're going to get. So I still remember getting on that train at 3rd and Townsend to go to the South, and what was going to be happening there. Well, I got there, and it was a wonderful experience. I mean, for 4 years, I was just normal. I felt like I'd never felt before. If somebody didn't go out with me, they just didn't like me. If I raised hell with my frat brothers, nobody raised the window and said, look at those so-and-sos, they were just kids having fun. If I didn't get my lesson, it wasn't presumed that I wasn't smart. I better live up to what they thought of me. And they had pretty high expectations. One of the interesting things was that first year I got a chance to meet John Lewis and march with John, as did a lot of other kids. And then it's interesting that next summer, between fall of 63, the spring of 64, the 64 Civil Rights Act was passed. And all those places that we couldn't get into, we were able to get into. Now, Nashville wasn't the Deep South, but nonetheless, it paid attention to what the law was. So I began to see what the majesty of the law was all about. I joined the Jubilee Singers there, which was the first group to ever sing spirituals on the concert stage. What happened was that the school was formed in 1866. By 1871, it was going out of business. And George White, the treasurer, got an idea. I'm going to put these kids on the concert stage and see if we can raise money to save the school. By the time they got up to Chicago, there was the fire, Mrs. O'Leary's fire. They gave all the money to the homeless. By the time they got to New York, Henry Ward Beecher's church, the Plymouth Avenue Church, they said, well, why don't we sing cabin songs and plantation songs? Up till then, they'd been singing madrigals, et cetera. Well, they were a huge hit. Then they went to Europe and sang before all the crown heads. Queen Victoria gave them enough money to come back and establish the main building on Fisk's campus, which is still there. It's called Jubilee Hall. And a couple of months ago, I was back celebrating the 150th anniversary. Actually, it was October 6th of the Jubilee Singers taking off. And I was there with my classmate and also some noted poets who were Nikki Giovanni was the keynoter that day. So representing my class and the Jubilee Singers. So I always kid my friends who were with the vaunted Yale Whiffenpoofs. I said, our group started off 40 years before yours. We saved our school and donated an art form to the world. So the heck with you guys and all you think of yourself. Well, so getting through Fisk was interesting. I was graduating at 20, didn't know what I wanted to do. I certainly didn't want to go to Vietnam. So I thought I might go to graduate school, maybe in history. Well, what they did was they sent me back the application forms, Michigan, Columbia, and Yale. And how many books have you published? How many articles from it? Well, I hadn't done any of that. And then I got an opportunity to apply to Harvard Law School. So I said, what the heck? I'll see if I can get in. Lo and behold, I did get in. And I got really intimidated because there were like 500 in the class. There were 20% of the kids were stratospherically bright. Another 20% were above average, and 60% were wondering how the hell they got in there, just like me. So I studied very hard the first year, wound up with 2 C's and 2 D's, but came back anyway. And I got a B plus and 2 B's my first semester. So I thought I got this place knocked. So I started singing 2 nights a week at the Ramada Inn on the Charles, broadcasting 2 nights a week, teaching tennis at Ratcliffe, and wound up flunking 2-year courses. So the dean said, well, you can either come back and take those courses again, or you can take off a year. I said, well, Dean, can I get an $800 loan to fly home and tell my parents? Well, with that $800, I was on the beach in Bermuda that next afternoon. I came back, took the easiest courses I could to get the hell out of there. And before the final grades came out, my mother came out, and this is graduation. We were walking down the hall, and the academic dean goes like this. My father said, "You could have been in the Roman arena, and I've been any happier to see that you were going to graduate." One of the honored persons that day when I graduated was A. Philip Randolph, the man who started the first Black union in America. And so it was wonderful to be able to take a picture with him. Came home, thought studying for the bar was a little too boring, so I wound up actually running for supervisor back in 1971. I came dangerously close to winning. I was listening to Alioto on the radio the next day. They said, "What are you going to do about those young 2 Black kids who ran for supervisor? They've either got a place in my administration or a commission." So I called up the mayor. I go into his office. "No, you ran a hell of a race. Sit down, son. My political mentor told me whatever the mayor says, tell him I'll think about it. I'll think about it, Mr. Mayor. What would you like? A place in my administration or commission?" No sooner than he says that, I said, "Commission, Mr. Mayor." So that was it. So I became a commissioner. Dianne Feinstein appointed me to another commission. I became a Choral Foundation fellow. And then following that, I wound up working for Commerce Clearinghouse over a legal publishing company over Marin from 75 to 78. Major thing happened in my life at that point. I got sober. I was drinking a little bit too much. And so now this year I'll have 44 years of sobriety. In the interim, I was doing a lot of radio. I worked for WJIB when I was back in Boston when I was in law school. I worked for KFOG. That was in the old days when it was in the clock tower of Ghirardelli Square. I can still remember all stereo music all the time on KFOG, KFOG at 104.5. KFOG music this morning is brought to you by Philip Biblon, the beautiful bookstore on Maiden Lane. And now more KFOG music. And then I wound up working for KYA. I was public affairs director from Monday through Friday. And then I did a talk show on Sunday morning. And this is really funny. The first time I'm doing a talk show, I have a guest on at 6 o'clock and she doesn't show. And there are no commercials on. So I had to talk for 45 minutes. Something I will never forget. Part of my experience is being a talk show host. When I got to, we started doing morning drive the next year. It was the first interracial morning drive show at a mainstream station in the country. And we had, quite a lot of success for that. I know we brought out we introduced Peter, Paul, and Mary down at the Circle Star Theater. We brought out the folks from WKRP. And that was a lot of fun for a week. We had a week with Leonard Nimoy. It was just big fun. I worked in the Jordan administration for 3 years as a press secretary. I was a syndicated columnist for Scripps Howard. I was a columnist for the San Francisco Independent. Worked with Charles Schwab. Got married and had 2 kids, first marriage, 2 kids in the second. I'm happy to say you got 4 kids. They're all talking to me. That's very important. If you're going to have 4 kids, you're going to be out of sorts with one. So I'm very proud. My oldest boy worked for Oracle for 5 years, Salesforce for 2. He's with a startup. My second son went to Oregon. He majored in girls and beer. And he came back home and he went to work for a law firm. And they said, "You got talent." So they sent him to night law school at USF. Came out, failed the bar 3 times. Wouldn't even talk to anybody about it. Went to work early, stayed late, worked nights, and now he is past the bar. He works with the Munger firm. And after George Floyd, they asked him what he could do. He said, "Maybe I can get him to put $100,000 into a black bank I do business with down in Los Angeles." By the time he finished with these guys, they put $2.5 million into that bank. And he's also the one responsible for their giving that land back to that black family. I think it was down in Southern California. Negotiating with the governor on that. So I'm very proud of him. And my daughter is kind of the superstar of the family. She worked for 10 years for Nancy Pelosi. She worked 4 years in the district office and 5 years back in Washington, D.C. on the Hill. And by the time she left, she was the press secretary. I've been the press secretary for Nancy for 3 years. And now she's a global manager for Spotify. And the baby boy worked for NBC. Baby boy, he played center for SI at 280 pounds. He's 6'2". He's now slimmed down, but at any rate, he now works for Amazon after 3 years in NBC in New York. I've been named a national commissioner with America 250 by Nancy Pelosi, and that is the group that I'm looking at my timer to make sure that I stay within the 25-minute limit. That is the group that determines what the events will be leading up to and including the 250th anniversary of the country. So we're working hard at work on that. Formed the Cole Porter Society as kind of a retirement gig, aside from writing for the Marin Independent Journal for the last 20 years. What prompted me to get into politics over here was there was an incident on Main Street where after hours, a Black storekeeper was moving things around in his store and was accosted by the police, asking him to identify himself and why he was there. And he said, "I don't have to identify yourself to you." And after a long hassle, it wasn't until a white store owner down the street said, "He's okay." And that really didn't have to happen. So I was asked to MC a town hall meeting, and that lasted for 3.5 hours. And then out of that came a diversity inclusion task force and the naming of a new police chief and a new officer. They both resigned after that. Well, the diversity inclusion task force only met 6 times out of the 12 it was supposed to meet, and they weren't getting anything done. So when one of the town council members stepped down, I thought, well, I might take that position. Well, 4 of the 5 members had been appointed themselves, but said, "Oh, we can't do that. You have to run for it." So I said, "Well, what the heck?" So I ran, and everybody gave me the endorsement, from Dianne Feinstein to Jared Huffman, our congressman, the mayor, the vice mayor, the Sierra Club, all the unions. And we raised $47,000, which is $40,000 more than the average person raises. We knocked on every door that we could. We had 3 teams of people knocking on doors, teams of people calling folks, and we won. And there were 4 candidates. We got 47% of the mail-in vote and 51% of the day of vote, and which meant I got more votes than any of the other 3 candidates combined. So I had sort of a mandate. So I've been on the council for 3 months now. I'm really enjoying my time there. Some person say, "Well, you're just running to pick up. You're going to be just a reform candidate with the Black vote in Tiburon." I reminded him that there are 82 Black folks in Tiburon out of 9,000, so I really couldn't depend upon that vote in order to win. It's interesting in San Francisco when you think about London Breed. There were 13% Black folks in San Francisco when I was growing up. They're like 3 to 5% now. So it shows you that you can win in a race without having that constituency, although it's good to have it when you can. So a lot of things I do for fun. I wrote the official song for the Giants opening day 21 years ago, and I'll share it with you now. I remember the day when the team used to play at the old Seal Stadium and a Candlestick Park. Though the contrast was stark, we still had lots of fun. Now we've moved to downtown, and the one thing we found, if you build it, they will come. It's no longer a dream. We're that World Series team in this new millennium. Here down at Oracle Park, we're playing down by the bay, right on the Embarcadero. Makes you smile and say, "Hey, you want to see Giant baseball? Better get out today to see the San Francisco Giants, the team of Mays, McCovey, and Marichal too. There'll be new Hall of Fame players waiting for you. You'd better get to the park so you can watch what they do and see the San Francisco Giants." Bum, 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 bum. We've been one ball-playing town right from DiMaggio Duel. The weather's never too hot. The good old fog keeps you cool. You'll never leave San Francisco. You're nobody's fool. You miss the San Francisco. Bum, ba bum, ba 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 bum. The San Francisco. Bum, bum, ba bum. San Francisco Giants. Go team!
Right.
Then every Wednesday morning, I do song parodies for KSVY Radio up in Sonoma. And Randall Reeder was talking about Ukraine, and I thought, that's in the news. What am I going to write about them? So I got up this morning and wrote this one. Ukraine is your land. Ukraine is my land. A sovereign country. It will not disband. They've withstood czarists and Putin's orders. Ukraine's determined to be free. Though tanks were stalking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. Ukraine's determined to be free. Ukraine is your land. Ukraine is my land. a sovereign country. It will not disband. They've withstood czarists and Putin's orders. Ukraine is determined to be free. And then for the ladies with the equality at soccer now, I mean, they're getting the same money now. It's been a long struggle. Equality, equality, equality has an enchanting sound, they say, of equal pay. Won the day, shout hooray. Women's soccer's 1 million's okay. Equality, equality, equality. In the future's a marvelous sight. The victory for decades out of sight. Now they've won the fight, showing their new might. It's a win for the soccer family. Equality, equality now. And lastly, before closing, I do some poetry. One of the poems I wrote on the Massachusetts 54th of Glory Regiment, I was asked to share at the unveiling of the Black Civil War veteran statue in Washington, D.C., and also in 2013 with Governor Deval Patrick at the laying of the wreath at the Shaw Memorial in Boston. But I just got a call last week to ask if they could read my Juneteenth poem in Broward County in Florida at a library there. And I will share with you because it's Black History Month. Juneteenth is a celebration of Liberation Day when word of emancipation reached Texas slaves, they say. In sorrow were we brought here to till a harvest land. We lived and died and fought here till freedom was at hand. They tore apart our families. They stole life's nascent breath, turned women into mammies and worked our men to death. They shamed the very nation which fostered freedom's birth. It died on the plantation, denying man his worth. But greed and misplaced honor brought crisis to a head, and justice felt upon her the weight of Union dead. They fought to save a nation, and yet they saved its soul from moral condemnation and made the country whole. But when the war was waning and the balance was in doubt, the soldiers were complaining as well as dropping out. There seemed but one solution which might yet save the day, although its execution loomed several months away. Abe did his best to hide it, and no one did he tell. He meant to sign an order to deal the South a blow. The Mason-Dixon border and the rebel states below would now have to contend with the freedmen on their land, for slavery had ended for woman, child, and man. The time 1863, the first day of the year, but June of 65 would be the time we would hold dear, for that would be when freedom's thought first saw full light of day and justified why men had fought and died along the way. Now every June we celebrate what Lincoln had in mind, the day he did emancipate the bonds of all mankind. Thank you, and I hope I've left enough time for questions. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Would you all join me in a round of applause? This has been a history lesson. You are a treasure, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Noah.
Amazing.
Bravo.
Any questions?
Thank you, buddy. Good seeing you.
Hey, Jim, I can hear your voice.
One thing I would add, a lot of where I am today is because of Noah, my first radio interviewer about teachers getting laid off, and people thought we were longtime friends. And 36 years ago, we had never met, but we sounded that way. And we have been for 36 years friends. But it's because the editor of the Examiner business section heard me on his show and said, could we do a local careers column? And I did what Tony's quote said. I said yes, not knowing what it was, went home, got sick to my stomach, and designed the San Francisco Career Series that turned into this. So thank you, Noah. And any other questions? This is like a history lesson that I never imagined. And I have to put on glasses to see whose hand is up.
Well, my hand is up, Roanne. So congratulations on a great introduction. Noah, your life as presented has been so exciting and interesting. I'm sitting here tearing up. Absolutely spectacular. My question would be, looking at how much you've accomplished and how great your children are doing, what are you looking forward to for the next 10 years?
Well, I'd like to see the country move towards the country that it's supposed to be, that it broadcasts itself as being. We see so many advances, and yet there's still so much to go. There's so much to go. When we take a look at the Supreme Court's gutting of the Voting Rights Act, I had a chance to speak with Clarence Thomas at one point, and I pulled him out of a gathering, and I said, "Why did you vote 5-4 decision to gut the enforcement of the civil rights of the Voting Rights Act?" Oh, well, things have changed now. The South has moved forward. We really don't need it. Well, we see how much we need it when the voter suppression is going on in so many different states across the country. I'd like to see this country live up to its creed, not only for my children, but for my recent grandson. I became a grandfather at 75 for the first time last year, and I'd like to see him grow up in a kind of America that reflects who he is and reflects the values that we have. I think it was Demosthenes that said there can be no lasting power built on an injustice. And if you don't think slavery and picking cotton had a long lasting impact on this country, I read the other day a book. Do you know what the number one export of this country was from 1803 to 1938? It was cotton. And who picked that cotton?
Yeah.
Question, Noah.
Yes, Rick.
Thank you, sir. The Tiburon Town Council, I have a feeling, that they either elect the mayor or the mayor rotates or whatnot. I guess the question is, when are we going to be able to address you as Mayor Noah?
Well, I'll tell you, I feel like Susan Rowan said about doing something that you're not quite. When I was in politics, I mean, although I was in charge of the black vote for McGovern in Northern California in 1971, 72, and then the black vote statewide for Clinton in 1996 down in Los Angeles. I failed to mention that. A lot of the times the decisions are made by other people, and your job is just to go out there and sell it. Actually making the decisions has been, determination has been an interesting journey for me. But to answer your specific question, it rotates. And I think maybe by the time it comes to me, which should be in maybe 2 years, I might be ready to be the mayor. I think I would enjoy doing it. First thing, I have short, middle, and long-term goals. And my short, middle, and longest term goal for, there's no guidelines, procedures as to what being a Tiburon Town Council person entails. So the attorney for our town is also the attorney for the community of Ross, and there are those guidelines. So the first thing I want to do is get that accomplished, and I think that the citizenry can depend upon what's written down, to know how to get things done, and there'll be no favoritism, et cetera. So the good thing about me in this job is it's no stepping stone, it's no resume builder. At 76, I'm not looking to move up or anything, so I can kind of speak my mind. I got a little trouble this last week because there was a vote on issuing a permit for the kids to sell wine and beer at a parade for Little League. Well, I think that adults can model good behavior. You don't have to make money off wine and beer when you're with kids. You can stay sober for 2 hours. So the vote was 4-1. I was the one against it. And my son told me, that might be a pretty strong lobby, the parents of Little League, but I did what I thought was the right thing. So we'll see what happens if I run again. I'd like to be 1 and done. I see Janice Lithman has got a question here.
Hi, Noah. Thank you so much. I moved to San Francisco in 1973, lived in the Richmond district many years.
Oh,
and had several friends who graduated from Washington, you probably know, but we can take that offline. The number one thing I got from your story, the theme or the thread that I received, was how you never shied away from a struggle or a fight. You role modeled so much amazing strength of character to stand up to so many obstacles. And so what advice do you have for the people trying to follow in your footsteps, not just for overcoming obstacles in general, but for the recent spate of racism, anti-Asians, anti-Semitism? There's just this new rash of hatred in the United States and the world. So what advice do you have for those of us who are fighting these fights?
Well, we just got a literature dump in Tiburon recently of anti-Semitic literature, and I have a statement in the paper today about we will not be that place where people feel comfortable doing that. And talking with the police chief, we have cameras, people coming in and out of town, so we can identify basically the folks that did that. I've been unafraid to take on challenges. What I didn't say in my talk was I sued ABC, KGO, and Cap Cities Broadcasting in the 90s for race discrimination. In the 35-year history of KGO radio, there was never a talk show host who is Black, who did a talk show between 6 a.m. and 12 midnight, all weekends, and all nights, weekends, and off. And I was told I would never work again in this business, in this industry, and I was able to do so. Currently, on the America 250 Commission, on which I sit, they've set up a shadow foundation that is supposed to make all the decisions for the commissions with no vote for the commission. And there have been 4 of us that have consistently over the last 5 years voted against that. And that will be a front page piece in the Wall Street Journal. I got it honest from my parents because they stood up for what was right. And I hope to do so, and I hope to model that behavior. So it's a part of who I am. But getting back to your being from the Richmond district, I love it. One person, Wag, said everything's misnamed in San Francisco. There's no sun in the sunset. There's no one rich in the Richmond. There's no beach in North Beach, and only love in the hate. So go figure.
That's adorable. Thank you so much.
Noah, I've got
Yes.
one for you.
Is that Reg?
Yes, it's me.
Okay. Your voice.
Thank you for being here today. We've missed you. And I'd like to know if you can work into your schedule, joining us at least once a quarter or something, you know, as a member or a guest of mine.
Well, I'd like to do that. I do song parodies Wednesday mornings, but I think I can get away. It's nice to know that somebody misses me. I don't think my first two wives would say the same, but that's okay.
And it's good to hear about how your kids were doing.
Well, I certainly remember coming at Christmas time when your kids were young, and they were always young because they have your last name, but they would play the piano. And it was just so great to see them grow up and become, I think one's a doctor now and somebody else.
Yes.
I mean, you just, and Jim Simpson's, his son-in-law has taken over his practice now. I think he goes in from time to time, and he was certainly helpful to the kids when they got injured playing sports coming along. Was a good friend of mine. And to see so many people that are still there after 30 years, it's wonderful. It warms my heart. But thank you, Reg. I will do that. I absolutely will do that.
Thank you.
Noah, Mike Milstein.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, my friend?
Great. I've met your kids, and great to hear they're doing so well. I would sure like to see a run for higher office. Do you see that as a possibility in the future?
Not really. I'd like to enjoy my so-called retirement. Politics is an interesting. When I got out of it, I thought I'd never get back in. I wrote a little quatrain. Politics makes strange bedfellows stranger still the ones you date. Older now, experienced mellows. I just as soon stay celibate. It's a lot easier poking fun at those folks when you're writing a column rather than getting in there. But I learned one thing. Nobody's more popular than a politician who's yet to make his first decision. I mean, you're everybody's friend. And Kennedy once said, every mother wants her son to be president, but nobody wants him to be a politician. But there are a lot of honorable. And the other one I like is a politician looks to the next election, a statesman to the next generation. So I think I'm looking to the next generation at this age.
Anyone? Yes. Hey,
Noah?
there's no name here. You just talk out.
Okay, may I say something? This is Christine Torrington. I just want to say it has been a privilege to know Noah in many circumstances over the years. It's been absolutely, wherever he is, wherever he goes, challenges or opportunities for him. He's so articulate, uniquely gifted, and shares just unequivocally with everyone he might do, for whom he might do something excellent or special. And it's just been a privilege. Come back, Noah, anytime you can, anywhere you are. If you have any kind of mailing list, I'd like to know. I'll support what you do. You're incredible. Thank you.
Well, Christine comes to all of our concerts, the most challenging one. And my wife looked at me, are we going to do this? You know, we formed the Cole Porter Society, and 6 years ago, Sinatra turned 100. And we thought, well, they're only honoring Sinatra at these small cabaret venues. Why don't we do something? Maybe the Herbst Theater. Well, the Herbst Theater at the time set 600. Well, the renovated Harps Theater seated close to 1,000. And she says, how are we going to do this? So we teamed up with the Chronicle, and we got 3 pages in the pink sheet. We filled the entire place. We had a 16-piece orchestra. We got a recording of Sinatra doing I Left My Heart in San Francisco. We commissioned a brand new video of that, which has been seen over 26,000 times. And it worked out really well, but taking on something we thought we could never do. And Christine Torrington was in the audience, and it was just great. So, would just say yes to life. Things you think you can't do, just go ahead and do it, and find out how to do it when you're asked to do it.
Great. Well, Steve Shane, you had a question.
Yeah, Noah, what it was so exciting to hear you today. And I wanted to get your email because I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. Can I get your email?
Yeah, just Noah Griffin Life Force, LIFEFORCE @gmail.com.
Okay, great. I appreciate it.
Garfield High, Seattle. All right.
Right.
I understand that you had a bunch of famous people that became famous that around here. It was Quincy Jones and Ray Charles made a lot of their time up there. And my first wife told me that Jimi Hendrix would come and perform from time to time at Garfield High.
Yeah, he was a year ahead of me. 1 year older than me.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any comments? Oh, yes, Randall.
I had a comment about as Will Rogers. Many of you know he was 1/4 Cherokee Indian, and in his movie career and writing, he always supported Native Americans, but he did it in a subtle way. He wasn't strident. He also supported Black actors, Stephen Fetchit, Bojangles Robinson. I'm using their popular names, not their real names. And the point I'm bringing to Noah is this first time I've heard you or met you, but I appreciated all the history that you went through in your presentation. And there wasn't any strident, there wasn't any complaining. You just presented everything in a nice, smooth fashion and so persuasive. So appreciate that. I think Will Rogers would appreciate your life and what you've done.
Well, every now and then another side of me comes out, and my friend Jim Simpson said something to me which I never forget, and I use from time to time. He said, "You keep messing with me, you're going to see a side of me you're not going to like." But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Noah, what's your email again? I'm sorry, Noah Griffin Life Source.
Noah Griffin Life Force, LIFEFORCE.
Okay.
At gmail.com.
You can put it in the chat if you'd like. That in case anyone wants to get in touch with you, Noah. If you do that. When I said Noah is a San Francisco treasure, I think I underestimated. He has been the professor of history for us. And I can't help but say, I never even thought about this. And we just picked this date that coincidentally is in Black History Month. And I've learned more about San Francisco and heard names that were, and I'm sure he's got juicy stories that he can't help.
What is the motto of the CIA from inception to eternity?
I have a question, Susan. Susan, first of all, fabulous introduction of an amazing man, Noah. I put it in the chat, but I will say it. I'm so impressed, not only with you, but with your parents and how they have raised you and probably your sibling and your children. My question, though, when you were talking about your speaking with Clarence Thomas,
I got it.
how did
I
you
don't have a card for Isla.
Steve Shane, we can hear you. Steve.
I'm sorry.
Mute yourself, please. Thank you. How did you handle your response to Justice Thomas when he said what he said?
Well, I met him in a situation where everybody's a gentleman. You have to be a gentleman. I prefaced it by saying, my father worked with your predecessor, And Thurgood Marshall won 29 of 32 cases before the Supreme Court. 9 out of 14 as Solicitor General, never once reversed on the Second Circuit. I did the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour when you were appointed. I just want to let you know that. And you asked about his response to me. Well, it was as if everything has changed and nothing is different. Everything has changed in the sense that everything is equal now. We don't. It's just like when Obama was elected president. We were in a post-racial America. We found out that wasn't true, and for him to be the fifth vote to either restrict the rights of Black people or not expand them to where they should be was a very cynical move on George H.W.'s part, or George H.W. Bush's. He stood up at Kenny Bunk Board and said, "This is the most qualified lawyer in America." Not only was he not the most qualified lawyer in America, he was somebody put to replace somebody who actually represented the aspirations and the goals of Black folks, not somebody who was put there to vote against Black folks in every opportunity that he got. So my nomination for a Black woman to be on the court would have been Anita Hill. I thought that would have been perfect justice.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I have been saying it and tweeting it. To have that man in Thurgood Marshall's seat is an insult to Thurgood Marshall and has made me forever not like Daddy Bush.
Well, I gave a talk last Monday and somebody said, well, he's just not your type of Black. He's not my type of Black. He's not my kind of jurist. I want people to reflect what this Constitution is about and be, if they want to be strict constructionists, fine. How about stare decisis? How about not overturning Roe versus Wade a little at a time, because it is established law. And all of them, when they go through the confirmation process, oh, I believe in the established law and I'm not going to be changing. This has been one of the most activist court in history, taking us back, back to the past, not moving us forward. And if you take a look at what the Constitution never envisioned what we have today, you talk about internet, things of that, personal liberty in terms of women's right to choose. So you just can't go back to the time of the framers, because women weren't considered people who were capable of voting. Blacks were 3/5 of a person. So when Thurgood Marshall said years ago, the Constitution was flawed from the beginning, it needed 10 amendments and several more and several rulings to make it approximate what it should be. It was very controversial, but what he said was absolutely true.
Yeah.
I will quote you, not my kind of jurist. Thank you. That is a brilliant. So for that, you owe me coffee.
At Pete's in the Cove.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Any other accolades? Noah, it's almost time. I can't thank you. Oh, Patricia, I just saw.
Well, I, of course, would like to hear when we turn off the recording, I would like to hear a story, perhaps about your time in San Francisco with Jordan or Feinstein that you would not want on a recording.
Let's turn the recording off right now.
We're going to need another hour.
Yeah. Hey, Reg, did you raise your hand and I just missed it?
No, I was just commenting. We're going to need a lot more time than we have that you go through that off record comment.
Okay.
But I might take a moment just to say, no, I really appreciate everything I just say. I took a lot of notes. I just really enjoyed getting to know you as a person in a way that we normally wouldn't. And then one takeaway was I appreciated the fact that you used the quote from Demosthenes. I thought that was really classy. So thank you for doing that.
It's all Greek to me.
All right. With that, it's 8:48 now. So why don't we go ahead and give Noah and Susan a hand, and we'll end the recording.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thanks,
to
Noah.
see you. Wonderful.
Thanks,
to see you.
Noah.
See you.
Much love.
We're going to go ahead and I'll end the